Every night at exactly 12:03 a.m., the faint sound of a violin drifts through the old Charleston Music Hall. The haunting melody is said to come from the spirit of Samuel Reed, a young black violinist enslaved in the 1800s, who was forbidden from performing for white audiences. On the night of his freedom, the hall caught fire, and Samuel vanished. His violin never found, centuries later, when a renovation team discovers a charred violin buried beneath the stage. Strange things begin to happen. Lights flicker, tools vanish, and a mournful tune echoes through empty corridors. But when a young musician dares to play the violin again, the spirit awakens with a story that still needs to be heard. Charleston had always been a city that hummed with music, from the soft strum of street performers to the hymns that floated from churches at dawn. But at night, when the moonlight kissed the cobblestones, the city carried a different kind of melody, one stitched with sorrow, silence, and secrets too heavy for daylight. The Charleston Music Hall stood like a memory, tall, elegant, and burdened. Locals often crossed the street rather than walk past it after sunset. Its wooden doors, warped with age, seemed to breathe with each gust of the coastal wind. For decades it had been abandoned, shut down after multiple reports of unexplained disturbances. They said, sometimes faint music played from within, though no one was inside. But for Naomi Ellis, a 23-year-old violin student from Atlanta, the old hall wasn't just an abandoned building. It was a mystery, and possibly her only shot at saving her failing career. Naomi had been a prodigy once. Her mother, a jazz violinist, used to tell her that her gift came from the ancestors. But after her mother passed, Naomi's music felt hollow. The emotion was gone. She played with precision, but no soul, and her professors could hear the difference when she learned that the Charleston Music Hall, the same hall where her mother had once performed a charity concert years ago, was reopening for restoration. Naomi felt drawn there, as if something or someone was calling her. So she applied for an internship under the Historical Restoration Project. Her task, to help catalog and document any musical artifacts found within the hall. Simple enough, until she found the violin. The first day she stepped inside, Naomi felt it immediately, the shift in the air. The hall's walls were scorched in places, remnants of a fire long ago. The stage was split with cracks, and from the rafters hung cobwebs that glimmered like threads of silver in the dust-filtered light. "Careful," warned Mr. Harlan, the site's supervisor, his southern drawl slow and steady. "This place don't like to be disturbed." Naomi smiled faintly, thinking he was joking. But Harlan wasn't smiling back. His eyes lingered on the stage curtains, where the burn marks looked almost hand-shaped. By afternoon, Naomi was knee-deep in old trunks and half-burnt sheet music. Most of the items were ruined, warped wood, water stains, and cracked instruments. But then, buried beneath a collapsed section of the floorboards near the orchestra pit, she found it, a violin, small, dark, and charred almost to black. The strings were broken, the bow snapped, but the craftsmanship was unmistakable. Even through the damage, the instrument's beauty glowed faintly. On the back of the violin, faintly engraved under the soot, she saw a name, S. Reed. Her fingers trembled. She didn't know why, but the name stirred something inside her. It felt familiar, almost like she'd heard it before, maybe in one of her mother's stories about forgotten musicians. Naomi cleaned it gently, revealing a small inlay on the neck of the violin, a carved dove, wings outstretched. It was exquisite, handcrafted, the kind of artistry enslaved musicians sometimes used as symbols of hope and freedom. She wrapped it carefully and placed it on the table, meaning to show it to Harlan later. But when she turned her back, a faint sound vibrated through the air, a single note. High, soft, fragile, but real. Naomi froze. The air felt thick, charged like before a thunderstorm. She turned back. The violin sat still, motionless. But one of the strings, though broken, quivered ever so slightly. That night, she stayed in her small apartment across the street, but sleep didn't come easy. The sound kept echoing in her mind. One note suspended in time. She dreamed of smoke, of a man standing in flames holding a violin to his chest. His eyes were sorrowful but proud, and when he looked at her, she heard a whisper, "Finish what I started." Naomi jolted awake, sweating. Across the room, the case containing the old violin was half open, though she remembered locking it. The next morning she confronted Harlan about the instrument. His expression darkened when she mentioned the name. "Samuel Reed," he muttered. That name should have stayed buried. He told her the story, the legend every old Charleston native knew. Samuel Reed was a young black violinist, enslaved on a nearby plantation in the mid-1800s. He was gifted beyond belief. His master would secretly let him play for elite audiences under false credit. When the Civil War ended, Samuel finally earned his freedom. The music hall had promised him his first public concert, but that night, the hall caught fire. No one knew what caused it. Some said it was sabotage. Others said Samuel had been locked inside. Only his violin was never found. Naomi's hands tightened around the case. "Then this belongs to him," she said quietly. Harlan nodded slowly, or to whatever's left of him. He suggested taking the violin to the Charleston Historical Museum, but Naomi hesitated. She couldn't explain it, but she felt like the violin didn't want to leave. Every time she touched it, her fingers tingled, and she swore she could hear faint music in the background, like someone practicing scales from far away. That evening, she stayed late at the site, documenting the rest of the artifacts. The power flickered now and then, and the air turned colder as the sun dipped below the horizon. She tried to focus, but every creak, every faint whisper of wind made her flinch. Then came the smell, faint smoke and rosin, like a freshly played violin bow. Naomi turned toward the stage. The violin case was open again. This time she was sure she hadn't touched it. She approached slowly. The violin sat on the table, but now it looked cleaner, less blackened, as if some of the burn marks had faded. Then she noticed something else, the sheet of music beside it. The ink lines had rearranged themselves, forming a title she hadn't written down. The Last Performance. Naomi's heart raced. She backed away, but the soft hum of a violin string rose in the air again, slow, mournful, and full of grief. The sound echoed off the burned walls, swelling into a melody that filled the hall. It was impossibly beautiful, and impossibly sad. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time in years, she felt something in the music. Not just notes, pain, love, and loss woven into every sound. When the last note faded, Naomi whispered, "Samuel." "Is that you?" A cold breeze brushed past her, rustling her hair. The lights flickered again, and from the far end of the hall, in the faint glow, she saw a shadow, a man's silhouette, tall, holding a violin. And then, as suddenly as it came, it was gone. Naomi stood frozen, her heart pounding. Whatever was haunting this place, it wasn't here to harm her. It was here to finish the song. The next few days blurred into a rhythm of quiet obsession. Naomi worked late every evening, claiming she needed extra time to document the hall's instruments, but in truth, she couldn't stay away from the violin. It had become more than a relic. It was a voice calling out across centuries, a melody unfinished. Each morning, she would arrive to find it slightly changed. The scorched wood grew lighter in color. The cracks seemed to soften, as if time itself was reversing. One morning she even found a faint trace of rosin dust on the table, fresh, golden, and fragrant. Someone, or something, was playing it at night. Naomi began researching Samuel Reed obsessively. She combed through archives, digital records, and yellowed newspapers at the Charleston Historical Society. There was little about him, just one small mention in an 1864 issue of the Charleston Courier. A colored violinist of remarkable skill, known as Samuel Reed, performed privately for many of the city's distinguished guests. His melodies were said to soothe even the most callous of hearts. Then another note. A few months later, following the fire at the music hall. The tragedy claimed several lives, including that of the newly freed musician, Samuel Reed. His violin, a treasured possession, was never recovered. Naomi's chest tightened as she read it. She could picture it, Samuel standing on that same stage, finally free, ready to perform before the world, only to have his life taken away before the first note ended. She whispered his name softly in the silence of the archive. And for a moment, the faintest strain of a violin drifted through her earbuds, though her phone was off. That night, she returned to the music hall after hours. She told herself she was checking inventory, but in truth, she was following instinct, or maybe fate. The hall was bathed in dim light from a single hanging bulb. Dust floated in the air like snowflakes caught in amber. The old stage creaked under her steps as she approached the violin. It sat exactly where she left it, centered beneath the spotlight. Naomi hesitated, then reached out and brushed her fingertips along the strings. They were brittle but somehow warm. The moment her skin touched them, she heard it, a faint hum that grew louder, harmonizing with her heartbeat. The entire hall seemed to breathe. Shadows deepened. The air vibrated softly with invisible notes, and then a flicker of light, a candle that wasn't there before, glowing faintly on the edge of the stage. Naomi stepped closer. The candle illuminated something new, a small piece of parchment tucked under the violin's chin rest. It was fragile, brown with age. She unfolded it carefully, reading the words scrawled in faded ink. To play for those who never heard. To sing for those who were silenced. Let my bow speak when I no longer can. Read. Naomi pressed a hand to her mouth. It wasn't just an artifact. It was a message from the dead. The following day, she brought the discovery to Harlan, expecting him to be amazed. Instead, he grew pale. Where'd you find that? His voice was sharp, frightened. Under the violin, she said. It's a dedication, isn't it? Harlan's jaw clenched. That thing's trouble. You shouldn't be touching it. Naomi frowned. It's history. It's his story. It needs to be told. Harlan turned away, rubbing his temples. You don't understand. My granddad worked here in the 40s when they tried reopening the hall. They found burn marks under the stage that never faded, no matter how many times they painted over them. Every time someone tried to restore the place, something bad happened. Accidents, fires, people hearing things. One man, he claimed he saw a figure playing the violin in the dark. He looked up at her. He said the man looked right at him and whispered, "Not yet." Naomi felt goosebumps rise on her arms. Maybe it's because no one ever finished his song. That night, Naomi stayed late again. The wind howled through the cracked windows and rain began to fall outside, tapping against the roof like fingertips. She set up a small camera on her phone, determined to record whatever happened after midnight. At 11:58, nothing. At 12:01, a low creak. At 12:03, the faintest note of a violin. The melody drifted like smoke, hesitant at first, then fuller, richer, layered with emotion. Naomi stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. It wasn't frightening. It was achingly beautiful. The song told a story of yearning, freedom, and loss. The sound filled the empty hall, and Naomi could almost see him. Samuel on stage, eyes closed, bow gliding across strings that glowed like embers. Her recording device flickered. The air shimmered. She whispered softly, "Samuel, I can hear you." The bowing stopped abruptly. Silence. Then, faintly, a whisper behind her. "Then play with me." Naomi spun around, but no one was there. Only the violin, now perfectly whole, the wood gleaming, strings shining like silver. The next day, Naomi brought the violin to her workshop. She cleaned it carefully, restringing it with new gut strings and restoring the bow with fresh horsehair. The moment she touched it, her fingers tingled, like electricity running through her veins. When she drew the bow across the strings, the sound was flawless, warm and resonant, unlike any instrument she had ever played. She felt something awaken inside her, the same spark she'd lost when her mother died. The music flowed effortlessly, each note carrying a depth she couldn't explain. It was as though Samuel himself was guiding her hand. Neighbors began to notice strange things. The sound of a violin playing late at night, long after Naomi had stopped. Lights flickering, shadows moving in the reflection of her windows. But Naomi didn't feel fear. For the first time, she felt connected to her music, to her heritage, to something greater than herself. As the restoration neared completion, Naomi proposed an idea to Harlan, a commemorative performance in honor of the hall's reopening. "We'll dedicate it to Samuel Reed," she said. "The musician who never got his concert." Harlan looked uneasy. "Naomi, this ain't wise," but she smiled softly. "He's waited over 100 years. Let's give him his stage back." The night of the performance came quickly. The hall, once a ruin, now gleamed under chandeliers. The audience was small. Locals, musicians, historians. Naomi stood backstage, trembling slightly. In her hands, the violin felt warm, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Before walking out, she whispered, "This is for you, Samuel." The crowd fell silent as she stepped under the spotlight. She lifted the bow and began to play. The melody was haunting, a reconstruction of what she had heard in the nights before. Each note rose and fell like a voice breaking through chains, trembling with emotion. Halfway through, something miraculous happened. The lights dimmed on their own. A soft golden haze spread across the stage, and from the shadows behind Naomi, a faint silhouette appeared, tall, elegant, holding a violin. Gasps rippled through the audience. But Naomi didn't stop. Her tears fell freely as the ghostly figure raised his bow, playing in perfect harmony with her. Two souls, one living, one lost, performing together at last. The air shimmered with music. The walls glowed faintly. The melody reached its peak, triumphant, sorrowful, transcendent. And when the final note faded, the figure smiled faintly at Naomi and dissolved into light. The audience erupted into stunned applause. Naomi stood motionless, breathing hard, her hands trembling. The violin in her grasp now glowed faintly, warm and alive. Some swore they heard one last whisper echoing through the hall. "Thank you for finishing my song." The next morning, Charleston woke to a legend reborn. Clips of Naomi's performance flooded social media. The audience's cell phone footage, shaky, grainy, filled with gasps, captured the impossible. The faint outline of a man playing beside her, his movements perfectly synchronized, vanishing as the final note ended. People argued online. Some claimed it was a clever projection. Others insisted it was proof that spirits could cross over through music. Naomi didn't respond to any of it, because she knew what she saw, and she knew how it felt. That cold, sorrowful warmth that lingered even after the applause had faded. For several days she tried to return to normal life, but normal was gone. Each night, she dreamt of Samuel Reed. In one dream, he stood on the burning stage, flames crawling up the red curtains, clutching his violin as smoke filled his lungs. In another, he walked through a field at dusk, barefoot, following the sound of distant music, a song that always ended before he reached it. When Naomi woke, she'd find her violin lying beside her on the bed, though she always left it in the other room. The line between her world and his was fading. At the museum, Harlan noticed the change too. "You've been pale lately," he said one morning as Naomi catalogued restoration photos. "You're not hearing things again, are you?" Naomi hesitated. "Sometimes, but it's not what you think." "He's not angry. He's just unfinished." Harlan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "That's how it starts. My granddad used to say the same thing about this place. Spirits tied to pain don't rest easy, Naomi. They always want more." Naomi smiled faintly, her exhaustion showing through. Then maybe what he wants is justice, not peace. Later that week, Naomi decided to dig deeper into the hall's history. She found an old blueprint of the building tucked away in the archives. One corner was labeled Servants' Wing, Restricted Access. That section had long been sealed, hidden behind a heavy wall of plaster. She asked the construction crew if she could examine it. They agreed reluctantly, chipping away at the plaster. After hours of scraping, dust filled the air, and beneath the wall, they uncovered a small wooden door. Naomi shone her flashlight through. The room inside was untouched, preserved in time. Old sheet music was scattered across a table. A cracked chair sat before it, and against the far wall, charred but intact, hung a portrait, a young black man in a formal coat, holding a violin. His eyes seemed alive, kind, deep, filled with both pride and melancholy. Below the portrait was a brass plate engraved, "Samuel Reed, Master of Strings, 1864. Naomi's knees weakened. The resemblance to the figure she'd seen that night was unmistakable. But there was something else. A second inscription, barely visible beneath soot. For him who played freedom into being. She took the portrait to her workshop, carefully cleaning away the layers of smoke damage. As she worked, she began to hum the melody she and Samuel had performed. Halfway through, the violin on her table, now displayed under glass, began to vibrate softly, resonating with her tune. The room grew colder. A faint whisper brushed her ear. Not all were freed. The words sent chills down her spine. Naomi looked up. For a split second she saw movement in the reflection of the glass. Figures, blurred and flickering, dozens of them standing behind her, silent, their eyes filled with grief. She stumbled back. The figures vanished. That night she couldn't sleep. So she went walking through the old quarter of Charleston. The streets glowed amber under the lamps, the air thick with humidity and salt from the harbor. Every step echoed like a heartbeat in the dark. She stopped outside the music hall, staring up at its grand pillars. Her reflection in the glass doors shimmered, and for a moment it wasn't hers. It was Samuel's. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then the reflection fractured like rippling water. Naomi backed away, trembling. She whispered, "What do you want from me?" And then, faintly, like a breeze, came his answer. To finish what was stolen. The next morning, she received an email from a local historian named Dr. Evelyn Porter. The subject line read, Your inquiry about Samuel Reed. Evelyn's message was brief but chilling. There are unrecorded pages from Samuel's diary, found in 1922, now locked in private archives. Rumors suggest he was more than a musician. He was using his performances to help slaves escape through coded songs, what they called the underground symphony. But the night of the fire, he was betrayed. Someone in the audience exposed him. Naomi felt a cold wave wash over her. Samuel's spirit wasn't trapped by tragedy. It was trapped by injustice. That revelation changed everything. Naomi started decoding his compositions. The notes seemed to form patterns, secret messages hidden within the music. Each piece told a fragment of a story, roots, names, dates, a map of liberation written in sound. But the deeper she went, the stranger things became. The air in her apartment turned heavy at night. She heard faint sobs when she played certain chords. One evening, as she was transcribing a particularly mournful passage, her lamp flickered, and a message appeared on the page in faint ash-gray letters. Find the last note. Naomi gasped. The letters faded as quickly as they appeared. She searched the archives again, desperate for clues. There were mentions of an unfinished symphony, one Samuel never got to perform. It was rumored to contain his final message to the world. If Naomi could find it, she thought, maybe she could finally set his soul free. But she wasn't the only one interested anymore. A few weeks later, a group of investors approached the museum. They wanted to buy the music hall and turn it into a luxury hotel. The board was tempted by the offer. Naomi protested fiercely, insisting that it was sacred ground. This hall is history, she said during the meeting. A man died here trying to tell his story. You can't bury that under marble floors and champagne bars. The investors dismissed her. But that night, as they toured the hall, the lights cut out suddenly. Their flashlights flickered, and from the stage a violin began to play by itself. The same haunting melody Naomi had performed. When the lights returned, one of the investors had fainted. Another swore she saw a man standing behind Naomi, tall, shadowed, with eyes that glowed faintly gold. The project was dropped the next morning. As word spread, the hall became famous again. This time, not for its concerts, but for its haunting. Paranormal investigators arrived from across the state. Naomi reluctantly agreed to let one team film overnight. At midnight, their cameras captured something extraordinary. Not only did the violin play again, but faint silhouettes of men and women appeared, walking through the hall, carrying lanterns, singing quietly in harmony. The footage showed them marching toward a door that wasn't there in reality, the same spot where Naomi had found the hidden room. They were recreating their escape. Samuel's music wasn't just a song, it was a memory, replaying itself every night at the same hour, a message to the living. A reminder that some journeys never truly end. Over the next few days, Naomi stopped trying to rationalize what was happening. Instead, she listened. She played the violin nightly, allowing the melody to unfold naturally. And each time she felt more spirits gather around her, unseen but present, their energy thick in the air. The more she played, the lighter the hall became. The shadows receded. The music grew brighter. But one night, as the clock struck midnight, everything changed. She heard a second melody, darker, dissonant, echoing from somewhere below. It wasn't Samuel. It was someone else. The candles on the stage flared violently. The walls shook. A door slammed shut on its own. Naomi fell to her knees, covering her ears. And then she heard a voice, furious, distorted. "He betrayed us all!" When she looked up, the portrait of Samuel had fallen from the wall, glass shattered, frame splintered. But instead of fear, Naomi felt clarity. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a confession. Someone had framed Samuel, and the spirits of those who perished with him still cried for truth. The next morning, Naomi returned to Dr. Evelyn Porter. Together, they combed through old police records from 1864. Buried deep in the ledgers, they found it. A name. Thomas Eerily, hall manager. Witness statements claimed he was responsible for reporting Samuel's secret gatherings. But after the fire, Eerily disappeared, and his family later became the first legal owners of the music hall. Naomi's blood ran cold. Harlan's full name was Harlan Eerily. That night, Naomi confronted him. He was alone in the office, staring at the old portrait she had restored. "I know your great-grandfather betrayed him," she said quietly. "Samuel Reed died because of him." Harlan's hands trembled. "I know. My family's carried that guilt for generations. But I stayed here to protect people from it." "Protect them?" she asked. "From what?" "The curse," he whispered. "Every 50 years the fire almost happens again. The music starts and someone gets pulled in. It wants to repeat. It wants justice." Naomi took a deep breath. "Then maybe we stop it." We finished the song. That sets the stage perfectly for the climax, where Naomi and Harlan perform Samuel's lost final symphony in the burning hall, confronting the betrayal and freeing every trapped soul. The old clock above the stage struck 12. Thunder rolled over Charleston, shaking the stained glass windows of the Charleston Music Hall. Rain lashed the streets outside, running down the cobblestones like tears. Inside, only two figures stood, Naomi Brooks and Harlan Eerily. The storm outside echoed the turmoil within. The hall was dark, except for the flicker of candles arranged in a circle on the stage. In the center lay the restored violin, Samuel Reed's violin, gleaming faintly, as if it had absorbed centuries of sorrow and silence. Naomi's hands trembled as she reached for it. The wood was warm, alive. Harlan watched her, his face pale. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "Once we start, there's no stopping it," Naomi nodded. "It's already begun, Harlan. We just have to finish what he couldn't." She raised the bow. And the hall exhaled. The first note sliced through the silence like lightning through glass. Low, resonant, full of grief. Then another, higher, trembling with hope. The music rose like a prayer, each chord unlocking a layer of memory. The candles flickered violently. The air shimmered. Naomi's eyes fluttered closed as she played. She could feel them gathering. Dozens of invisible presences, moving through the aisles, whispering faint hymns, humming along in forgotten harmonies. The temperature dropped. From the shadows behind the curtains, a faint golden glow began to form. A silhouette, tall, elegant, stepped into the light. Samuel Reed. He looked exactly as he had in the portrait, dignified, composed, eyes full of untold stories. Naomi's breath caught, tears stinging her eyes. She kept playing. Samuel nodded once, a silent cue, and raised his own ghostly bow. Together they played in perfect synchrony, their melodies merging into one. Harlan watched from the edge of the stage, spellbound, but something felt wrong. As the music swelled, the walls began to ripple. the old plaster peeling away, revealing the burnt beams and blackened wood beneath. For a moment, the hall wasn't in the present anymore. It was 1864 again. The chandeliers glowed with gaslight, the seats filled with elegantly dressed men and women, all pale as ash, their eyes empty. Spectral flames licked the curtains. Smoke drifted from the ceiling. Naomi gasped, but she couldn't stop playing. The music held her captive. Samuel's spirit turned toward the audience, and for the first time spoke. His voice was soft, echoing from everywhere at once. "You listened to my music, but never my truth." The ghostly crowd began to stir, faces twisting with guilt and sorrow. Then a single figure rose from among them, Thomas Ellery, the hall manager who betrayed him. His face, twisted with fear, looked eerily like Harlan's. Samuel's expression hardened. "You sold me for silver and left us to burn." The ghost of Ellery trembled. I was ordered." But his words were drowned out as the fire roared again, consuming the phantom scene. Naomi screamed over the flames. "Samuel! You don't have to relive this. You can end it." Samuel turned to her, eyes full of anguish. "It must end with truth, not silence." Harlan stumbled forward. "Then tell me what I can do." Samuel looked at him, really looked. "Your family's bloodline carries both the curse and the key. You must play the final note." Naomi glanced at him, shocked. "Harlan, you can't." But Harlan had already stepped into the circle. His face glistened with tears. "Maybe it's time my family pays its debt." Samuel nodded slowly. Naomi handed him the bow. "Then play with me." They stood together in the center of the stage, the descendant of the betrayer and the descendant of the forgotten, united by one melody. The storm outside raged louder. Lightning flashed through the windows, casting veins of white across the room. The two began to play. The symphony's final movement was unlike anything Naomi had ever heard. It began in dissonance, harsh, broken, like chains clashing in the dark. But then, slowly, the melody evolved into something soaring, powerful, triumphant. Each note seemed to rewrite the past. The ghosts in the audience stood, their faces softening. The flames began to fade. Samuel lifted his bow one last time and spoke. "Let the music free them all." He drew the bow across the strings, a long, trembling note that filled every corner of the hall. Naomi and Harlan joined him, and as the final chord resonated, the air exploded with light. 1,000 shimmering figures rose from the floor, men, women, and children of all ages, all races, all bound by the same history of pain. They looked at Samuel, smiling, and then turned to Naomi.